Oh, yeah. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce you to José Chalhoub. He's our contributor, one of our main and most important contributors at OhmResearch, and especially because he's talking about these days one of the most important things going on in the market, which is energy, oil. Everything is about energy. Everything is about what's going to happen to the oil price and gas prices in Europe. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Jose. Jose is based in Venezuela. He has worked at PDVSA, has numerous contacts at OPEC, and he writes almost every day at OhmResearch with his insights on the oil price. So I hand over to Jose. He's going to talk about his background and how he sees more or less the oil markets, especially from a geopolitical perspective. And then we kick on with questions, and happy to take questions from the audience. So thank you very much, Jose.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you for having me and for the opportunity. Well, yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, I had my past experience working for PDVSA, which is the Venezuela state-owned company, Petróleo de Venezuela, for 13 years. I I majored in political science. That's my career. Then I did a master's in international oil trading and politics. All my career in PDVSA, I was dealing with analysis of strategic information, international information, political risk analysis, and commercial risk analysis. I had the chance to be in close contact with some of my colleagues that had direct contact with OPEC meetings and Petrocaribe. I had some direct contacts and had some direct experience traveling to some of the countries that benefited from the Petrocaribe mechanism that Venezuela sponsored for many years, especially under the former President Hugo Chavez. Then in 2016, I decided to move ahead with my career, and well, ever since until currently, I've been working as a freelance analyst and consultant, mainly providing country risk analysis and assessments, dealing with all things related to Venezuela, which is the country I was born, and I'm residing right now. Uh, Writing for different specialized websites and magazines dealing with oil, geopolitics, and Venezuela, being quoted with by different magazines in oil and energy. And in the last, I don't know, 2 years, I have the privilege of working with you guys with a platform, and that's, let's say, my my main commitment right now. Kind of my main commitment as as providing my insights, my analysis, and I really will. I really am. I appreciate the opportunity to be working with you guys.
No, that's great. And Jose, let's start with the director of the International Energy Agency. He said he made some quite intriguing statements this morning. He said that we have the most extreme energy crisis ever, and he said it's actually getting worse. So, I mean, do you agree with him? And what could change this outlook? I mean, and if you could elaborate a bit, give us a perspective. How did we get to this place? And compare that to other crises you have seen before.
Yeah, well, yeah, in part I agree with him, and because of the last 3 years mainly, ever since the pandemic, the unfolding of the pandemic worldwide, and that came from China and unfolded all across the world. Uh, these 3 years have been really turbulent, volatile for global markets. Let's remember, we passed from a reduction of the demand of more than 50% of global oil. We had even negative prices to minus 35%, minus $35 per barrel. I remember that. So we passed from that stage to a gradual recovery of the demand and economic recovery post pandemic until we reached this point after the war in Ukraine erupted, that caught by surprise many of the countries in the world, and especially Europe. It caught it off guard. So I think, in part, the director of the International Energy Agency, he's right. But I have to make a point here that the International Energy Agency, just like OPEC, it has its own agenda, its own political agenda. It, the IEA, it's comprised by mostly all, I mean, oil consumers, oil importers, most of the countries that belong to the OECD. So let's remember that this organization was the creation of former Secretary Henry Kissinger. So he sponsored the creation of this organization to defend the interests of the consumers, and as a kind of an alter ego to the OPEC, to the creation of the OPEC. So that's the point that I wanted to make. Yes, we are facing an energy crisis that's unfolding. We might not be, maybe we are not seeing the worst yet. I think the war in Ukraine, it's barely leaving consequences. And as long as it keeps on the table, I don't see it ending yet. I see the President Putin still, relentless and looking for, controlling Ukraine, or at least the Donbass region. But yes, we are facing an energy crisis, unlike the one that erupted after the Arab embargo in the 1970s, right? Because the Arab embargo, as far as I remember, that was that was a crisis targeting that was an embargo targeting the U.S. and other countries in Europe. But this crisis, yeah, we might be seeing a wider crisis, but not so far, uh, with the consequences that maybe could get much worse as long as the war in Ukraine, as the inflationary process keeps on the table.
Yeah, no, this is very interesting. A lot of people don't appreciate how watch the story of the IEA and being an alter ego to OPEC. We're gonna talk about OPEC later, but clearly, there's a huge imbalance of supply and demand, and people tend to politicize everything these days. And how, I mean, and of course, some people are saying that we are where we are because of ESG and because of the commitments to net zero and that kind of thing. Uh, from your perspective, the situation where we are now, how much of that is really because there was a lack of investments in fossil fuels over the last, I don't know, 10 years? And I mean, I know it's very complex and it may be difficult to put a number on these things. And how much of that is the disruption because of the war?
Yeah, well, as I return to the point of the pandemic contributed a lot to this, to the, past lack of investment, lack of capex, expenditures and new investments in new. I Let's remember that in the last, I don't know, 10 years, there hasn't been any new discovery of, giant fields, what they call giant fields of oil, and
Mhm.
like the ones that were discovered, I don't know, in the 1970s, 1960s, in countries like Saudi Arabia or Mexico that are now.
And even the pre-salt in Brazil, right, in 2007, right?
That's correct. That's correct. So most of the, the most, yeah, the most relevant, giant fields or super giant fields were discovered in the past decades, and no new relevant discoveries uh, are being done right now or in the last, I don't know, 10 years, 15
Mhm.
years. So that's one of the main reasons that are, that are contributing to the problems of supplies that we are seeing right now, including problems of refining. We are seeing lots of problems with refining in the world. So that's another reason contributing to the problems and the high prices of oil products, uh, mainly in countries like in the United States. They are now in high rates of capacity of refineries utilization. So that's and with the pandemic, this situation was accelerated with the destruction of demand, the drop in oil prices. We saw incredible low levels of prices that uh, you know contributed even further to the discourage of new investments. Producers were even paying buyers to take oil, to take the cargoes of oil during the pandemic. And yes, I agree with you that as I pointed out before, there's two conflicting agendas right now. One led by OPEC Plus, defending their oil business, their oil gas business, and the other one that is that's led by the IEA. And let's remember that the IEA in last year, as far as I remember, they were calling urgently for net zero emission era. But right now they're urgently calling for more oil. They're making repeated calls to OPEC for more for extra oil. So I mean, it's kind of ironic, but now we are seeing that the world is still dependent and will be dependent on the fossil fuels for I don't know, maybe for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years more. And as much as oil remains king for transportation, that's the main destination for oil utilization. So definitely, and this war is proving it. This war is proving that the natural gas and the oil are still relevant despite all the calls for and all this hype of ESG.
Yeah, and especially natural gas. I mean, I think a lot of people don't. I mean, a lot of people know, but some people don't know that gas is the cleanest of all fossil fuels, and it's seen as a transition energy towards towards renewable. And as a matter of fact, the recently as recently as 2 3 weeks ago, the European Union has considered both nuclear and natural gas as clean energies. So yeah, no, these are very important points, and of course, there is a multitude of aspects. One thing I wanted to ask you, Jose, is about the Russian oil. So what's really happening to Russian oil? So one theory that I you know not that I have, but I mean one version that I hear all the time is that uh, oil, there hasn't been any, I would say, not restriction, but the Russian oil has still managed to find its way. So it's instead of going to the traditional buyers in Europe, in the US, whatever, in the Western world, it's going to China and to India at a discount, and that's the very reason why there is no inflation in China. Inflation in China is 2%, and inflation in the West is 8 9%, because they're buying Russian oil with a discount. So I mean, is that really the case? And even I've heard, and I think we discussed this before, that there is Russian oil being smuggled through Turkey and Iran, and the West is kind of turning a blind eye to this. Otherwise, prices will be at a much higher price. Is that really the case?
Yeah, what's there? I mean, I think that what's there being right now is a dislocation and
Mhm.
relocation and rerouting of the Russian oil. Uh, I mean, based on different reports so far, at the very least, there's been a vanishing because of the sanctions, at least just 1 million barrels of Russian oil, 1.5. But you never know if those barrels are completely vanished from the oil market. But the one thing is that, yeah, China, India, and countries like maybe Turkey are buying on rebates, on discounts of over $35 less per barrel of Russian oil. So that's what I think. That's what's being carried out. The Russian oil is being also based on different reports. Transported via the mechanism called STS, which is ship to ship. That is that the Russian oil, sails from a Russian port. Then after it sails, it got transferred to another ship until and they shut up their satellite. Much of the mechanism that Iran and also Venezuela uses to to transport their sanctions, their oil and their sanctions. So that's basically what I think. And also one ironic thing is that one country such as India, which is reluctantly has been rejecting calls by the U.S. and not to buy Russian oil, it's buying a lot, and it's
Mhm.
also reselling part of that oil to Europe.
Yeah, they're refining and reselling to Europe. So, I'm sure I don't know what the company, it's Reliance, right? Or I don't know which
Yeah,
other companies doing
mostly
this.
Reliance. Mostly Reliance.
I know, I'm sure they are making, they're probably having the best year of their history, with huge profits by doing this, correct?
And Rosneft has investments and participation with another company, with another Indian company, in another refinery called Nayara, as far as I remember.
Uh-huh.
So there's lots of Russian Indian deals and participation in the oil sector. So that's what I believe. That's what I think, and uh, I think that despite all, because this is a personal view, despite all the atrocities, despite the thing that what Russia is carrying out or what Putin's carried out against Ukraine is not fair. But Russia, all of its resources, all of its oil, all of its gas, for Europe especially, it's too big to fail. I mean, it's too big to fail. Europe is we are seeing it right now. Europe, the European Union, most of its countries are rushing out to get more gas sources, more oil. It's trying to advance or revamp its, LNG gas infrastructures. It's rushing out to get more clients of LNG, which is costlier. So that's what I think. Russia is too big to fail, and the consequences of not seeing any barrel of Russian oil in the market, it's unpredictable. That's why I mean, Europe it's the one that it's gonna suffer the most because
Hmm.
I mean for the Russian oil, the main destination always and also for natural gas has been Europe, and the other destination Asia, but mostly Europe. I mean, what, for example, the United States, yeah, they sanctioned the Russian oil, but how many barrels the U.S. has been getting in the last, I don't know, 2 years of Russian oil? I mean, once it reached 500,000 barrels of day, per day of Russian oil, but that's it. I mean, they sanctioned Russian oil, but that's it. They're not going to be impacted. Not for now.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's
and one thing that I struggle, I mean, I have a lot of difficulty to understand how something like this could possibly be implemented is, I mean, this story about the G7 trying to put a price cap on Russian oil. I mean, how on earth, can something like that be implemented? I mean, is this something they say just for political posturing and to fool the audience, I mean, how can that be possible? I mean, I would say this would be something very difficult to enforce.
Yeah, I mean, I've been telling you in the last couple of days that I've been struggling to to understand with this proposal, or I don't know if you remember that the EU has been putting on the table different other proposals that none of them has come to a positive fruition, like taxing the Russian oil, or adding sanctions to the insurance companies that carries Russian oil. I mean, different measures that they don't even know how it's gonna unfold. I think that this thing of capping the price of Russian oil, it's in the end, and that's my particular view. It's admitting that the Russian oil is very important for Europe. I mean, they're looking for ways to not completely destroy or vanish the Russian oil from global markets or from European markets, because I mean, it's like shooting themselves on the foot. I mean, for Europe, because as I repeat, the U.S. is not struggling without Russian oil. I mean, the ones that are suffering is
Yeah, yeah,
European
absolutely.
continent, because I mean, not even China. China is making rebates, is buying on the cheap since long. I mean, and for them, okay, that's perfect. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, and how is uh, OPEC very well. I mean, you talk to a lot of actors who've been to their meetings. How is the political environment there these days? And my question here is, I mean, Biden is going to meet, with Mohammed bin Salman in the next few days, and if I'm not wrong, he's also going to speak to the Emirates, to the Emirati. So how? I mean, can he get something out of Saudis? I mean, do they have the capacity to increase production? And even if they do, will they do something about it? Or do you just think that MBS and Putin are going to take Biden for a ride and make him go back home empty-handed?
Yeah, well, first of all, OPEC, and ever since the unfolding of the pandemic, I went again, and after the especially after the inclusion of Russia as an ally, or the most important ally or the partner of the OPEC, the organization has been showing a very significant discipline in trying to stabilize the markets, at least. Even though that OPEC, like the original organization so far, and of all, specifically, I'm talking about this recent monthly market report that was released today. OPEC, just OPEC countries, they they don't comprise more than 30% of the total global supply. I mean,
Mhm.
you have 30 millions of, or less, 28.7 millions of barrels of oil belong to OPEC, to OPEC members. Those are are those that are not included in the quotas. I mean, and the rest belong to non-OPEC countries that are included in the alliance of OPEC Plus. But yes, I think that the organization has shown an incredible. I mean, it's another phase for OPEC. This is another critical and testing moment the alliance, including Russia. After the pandemic, in trying to stabilize the markets, in trying to get a healthy level of prices for oil for oil barrel, because I mean, it's not sustainable to get $130 per barrel, especially for clients, for consuming countries. Now that we are seeing again a global economic crisis, and now that we are facing a potential global recession. So that's talking about the OPEC technical. Uh, the geopolitical environment, the political environment inside the organization, there's always been a confrontation or a divide between the aggressives and the moderates. That's it. That's talking about the Gulf monarchies, traditional allies of the United States in the Gulf. and siding traditionally with the the U.S. requirements of more barrels of oil and and low prices of of oil, led by Saudi Arabia. But that thing has changed. That thing has changed, and we are seeing right now another environment, at least visibly talking. We are seeing a regional landscape marked by a sustained rivalry and competition between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Uh,
Hmm.
that's the main, crisscrossing issue that's defining the regional geopolitics in the Middle East, and that's traditionally being reflected in all meetings and all things related to OPEC. Uh, that's that's one of the issues marking the regional dynamics that the President Biden is going to face when he travels to Saudi Arabia and Israel. That's the other country included in his tour, and when he attends the GCC meeting. Okay, the this thing about Iran that we have a nuclear talk that's heading nowhere. We have an Israel trying to establish a strong bloc to counter and to torpedo any nuclear deal with Iran, including joining forces with monarchies in the Gulf that traditionally have had a contrarian posture towards Israel, mainly because of the Palestinian cause. So, but now, especially after the former President Donald Trump established the so-called Abraham Accords, that the you know overall established some guidelines for Israel and trying to redefine some of its of its foreign policy in the Middle East and the Gulf. And in my view, that's mainly targeting Iran and all of its fosters. And I think that in this tour that the President Biden is gonna take to the Saudi Arabia, I don't think that he's gonna reach any significant result on getting more oil from Saudi Arabia or the Emirates. It's been repeatedly talked, written about the dropping spare capacity from the key countries such as Saudi Arabia and the Emirates. They hardly reach 2 millions of barrels between both of a spare capacity. I mean, those are the two most relevant countries and players holding the most relevant spare capacity within OPEC. So that's for technical reasons, and because of you need to invest money, you need to pour money to have spare capacity in order to add in emergency moments of the markets. So I think, and I've written about that the U.S., especially during this visit, should focus instead in trying to, improve its image, its traditional position in the regional dynamics. Now that you have other players such as Russia, such as China in the geopolitical dynamics in the region, you have China becoming gradually one of the main and most important destinations for Saudi crude oil exports, different and massive investments that the Saudis have been pouring in China, in Chinese refineries, and yeah, different things and different deals between the Gulf monarchies and both Russia and China. So that's what I believe that President Biden should focus instead, because he hardly will get any more oil, especially considering the current situation and the current problems facing OPEC. Technically speaking, because they have been under complying, excluding countries like Saudi Arabia or the the Arab Emirates or Kuwait, that according to this recent report that was released today, they produce more, but they were still under complying their quota. So it's not about like for pure political purposes. It's because for technical reasons you can't just pump more oil because if you don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what I
No,
believe, and I think that the geopolitical dynamics in the Middle East and the Gulf is changing. It's really changing. It's unfolding. It's very dynamic, more than ever. You have the other situation in Libya. That's becoming a very difficult obstacle to resolve, especially for the United States, France, Italy, that have been trying to mediate and trying to find any visible or clear solution for the political crisis that in my view this crisis has been going on ever since the toppling of Muammar Gaddafi. I mean, the country hasn't found any real political stability ever since 2011. That's when the revolution started, and that toppled Gaddafi. We are seeing right now another political uncertainty, two conflicting powers that are struggling to get power, and that has shut this conflict has shut the production to down more than half of its production. I mean, Libya recovered its overall production in the last year significantly to jump over 1 million of barrels per day. And now, according to this recent report, Libya was producing for June 650,000 barrels per day. And that's because that's based on secondary sources, because the data coming from Libya has been really difficult, confusing because of this whole situation that's impacting its oil industry. That's it.
And no, it's all very complex. And when you say that the geopolitics in the Gulf is changing, am I correct to interpret that the U.S. was totally dominant, a few years ago with the Arab countries, with the Saudis and the Emirates, and now, is it true that China and Russia are gaining some influence on the Saudis especially?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't dare to say that they're now they're most influential players. It's a different world in my view. It's a world in the making. Each player is designing the world around each player in their respective regional spheres of influence, such as Russia, such as China. Uh, and yeah, I mean, commercially speaking, they're making significant advances in the Middle East and the Gulf in different areas, different fields, especially in the oil and gas sector, and also in other fields such as nuclear, especially Russia. Russia has been making important deals in the last years with countries in the Gulf in the nuclear sector. So I wouldn't. I mean, it will depend on the ability of the United States and Washington in how it reasserts itself in the regional dynamics, and how, for example, related to Saudi Arabia, how it manages to deal with different issues that are kind of blurring the landscape of Saudi-U.S. relationships, such as the killing of the Saudi journalist in Turkey, Khashoggi, and other different topics such as human rights respect. Uh, so that's that'll be much on the U.S. and the current administration field, and how it manages to seduce again the Saudi kingdom, uh, especially after the former President Trump managed to get a closer relationship with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Mhm. And no, this is all very interesting, and we are extending the time a little bit. So I want to close talking about gas. Uh, of course, you saw. There's this big imbroglio involving the Siemens and the turbine coming from Canada. So so people can understand what we're talking about. So the Nord Stream 1, which is the main pipeline taking Russian gas to Europe, went on maintenance yesterday, and it's going to remain on maintenance until July 21st. And the question now is what Russia is going to do after this maintenance ends. Now that they don't have the excuse anymore that they don't have the parts coming from Canada. So I want to ask you, Jose, what do you think is going to happen? It's not exactly on July 21st, but from that day, is Russia going to resume the supply of oil to Europe? Are they going to stop indefinitely? Because the European governments, the Bruno Le Maire in France, he told his people, he told and he's telling his colleagues, okay, be prepared for those supplies not to be ever restored. So, I mean, what does Putin has up his sleeve? I mean, what is Russia going to do? You think? I mean, on July 21st?
Well, I I mean, as I view it, this is this is a war of action and and counter reaction, and this has been long in the making. It's known that Russia owns almost the majority of gas pipelines that's been constructed all across Europe. I mean, or operated by Gazprom, or in deals that have been designed with other partners in Europe, with local companies in different countries. So it's a retaliation to operations that have been carried out in the past by the U.S. and Brussels. Like, for example, when they sanctioned the Nord Stream 2
Yeah.
pipeline, the section of the Nord Stream 1. Also, that happened few years ago. The other gas pipelines that was called the South Stream, that was supposed to carry gas to most of the southern European countries, that was put off, that was called off because of sanctions and different political standoff over this situation. I think that as much as Russia is using gas as weapon, because it clearly is, it's been a reaction to years of a grand strategy between the U.S. and the European Union of trying to win themselves off of Russian gas dependence and trying to curtail Moscow of
Mhm.
its control of the majority of pipelines. Moscow also operates a pipeline called the Blue Stream to Turkey that carries gas directly to Turkey.
Mhm.
Uh, and in the end, I think that Moscow, as long as the war in Ukraine continues, as long as the sanctions continue, and as long that the hostilities continue, I mean, for Putin, it will. I mean, in my view, it's much harder for Russia and the Kremlin to switch the gas transport via pipelines to gas exports via LNG to China. Much more harder than oil. To redirect oil transports to China from Europe. But he knows that it still depends on the gas transactions with Europe. I mean, that's why he hasn't stopped allegedly transports of gas via pipelines, crossing your Ukraine territory, for example, because I mean, this is something that I've been saying for a long time. I mean, because of geographic contiguity, because of geographic proximity. I mean, Russia and Europe they have been destined to work together, to be in deals together. Uh, but unfortunately, for this political purpose, the conflict, the political motivations, all this situation has derived in this crisis. And as long as the EU, the European Union, doesn't come along on a unified, concrete, and visible and solid strategy to wean themselves off their dependence on Russian gas. I mean, Putin will do whatever it takes. I mean,
Yeah.
he's not gonna care. I mean, that's my view.
Yeah, no, and it's true as you said. I mean, it's action and reaction. So, I mean, of course, to me, and that's my view. One scenario that I consider the sum of all nightmares the sum of our fears is if for some reason Europe has to ration gas in the winter. I mean, if they have to do some kind of rationing in the winter, because then this could spark, serious political consequences. So and of course, Russia knows this, but at the same time, my view is that they basically Putin, time is on his side. Time is his friend because he can basically end this conflict, when he wants and the way he wants, and he can, let's see what kind of concessions, he can extract because of this whole the boomerang effect that the sanctions has. But the question is, let's say if he decides, to cut indefinitely, and Europe gets no more Russian gas, that's it, done. Do you think that Europe can get enough gas, to make it through next winter?
Yeah, the crucial thing here is storage. I mean,
Yeah.
Europe needs to fill storage to a certain level. I think it's over 75% of their total storage. That's I think the mandatory thing within the union. Uh, Today I was reading that Spain, according to a utility in the country, that Spain is not going to suffer from any potential cutoff
Hmm.
uh, of further cutoff of Russian gas. Um, but well, I mean, you have Europe rushing out to cut countries like Qatar, as I mentioned, or the U.S. But that's talking about LNG. You need to build more LNG infrastructures and
Hmm.
quick. I mean, we're not talking about. I mean, we're talking about speedy construction of infrastructures, and as long as you don't get clients sources every day to to try to cope up with your demand of gas, and especially as winter is coming soon. So you need to have strong storage, at least to weather out this crisis, praying that this war in Ukraine doesn't doesn't get too much protracted
Hmm.
for years or months or years. I mean, let's pray that not. But yeah, I mean, for me, the key is storage and to find. Let's remember that Qatar also is strained by contracts, by long-term contracts.
Hmm.
That's why they have been repeatedly telling Europe that they're constrained by long-term contracts of shipments that they have been, committing to other countries like China or in the Asia Pacific. So that's, I mean, they just can't reroute or shift, these cargoes to countries in Europe just like that. But yeah, we have been seeing that countries like Germany or other European countries have been courting Qatar uh, for more, for LNG cargoes. But yeah, I mean, as I repeat, I mean, storage. You need to have strong storage in your tanks, in your tank fields, and you need to have strong infrastructure for LNG if you really want to switch to a dependence on energy. That's what I believe, and well, let's hope that this crisis doesn't go for much longer.
Yeah. Do you believe in any peace agreement, at all? You think that's possible? Because sometimes we hear this.
Well, it's been long since we haven't heard
Yeah.
any at least some slight piece of news about any country trying to, I don't know, proposing a mediation. No, I mean, and I think that even the news about the war uh, sadly have been diluting.
Yeah. Exactly. No, people
I
get
mean, the
tired of it.
media,
So
yeah,
yeah.
the media coverage is not the same. Trust me. I mean,
Yeah.
even on Twitter, even on social media, now the, because I mean, now the whole coverage is on the energy crisis,
Yeah.
but that's a kind of the consequence of this war. I mean, not the only one, but I mean, but the media coverage is not the same. I mean, I really hope for this crisis to end. I really hope that this thing about nuclear or the use of nuclear weapon doesn't go beyond just like that, and that's it, because that is really dangerous.
Yeah. Of course. No, so that's great, Jose. Thank you very much. It's been great. I'll be writing an update so we can go on our daily tomorrow. Thanks again, and we're going to do this on a regular basis. So thank you once again. We plan to have Jose every 15 days. I mean, every other week here, talking about geopolitics and oil. So thanks again, and look forward to the next one.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Thank you.